Thank you very much, Eugene, for those very kind words. And thank you very much to the, if I stand here, is it still good?
Yeah.
You're good in front of the laptop. Thank you very much to the Actuaries Institute as well for giving me this platform. So this says competing with generative models. I realized just as I came in the door, if you think that I'm going to like make superpower you with GPT-3, you might, or GPT-4, you might be disappointed. But hopefully there's something for you in this anyway. I'll skip that one. So I was watching this interview with Satya Nadella after he was rolling out. So ChatGPT had come out. He was in a very confident mood, and the Wall Street Journal journalist asked him what kinds of jobs are most threatened, and his answer was actually data scientists. Yeah, I mean, being in this room, I think people here understand the threat better than most. I think there's a lot of rooms, a lot of meetups happening now where there are people simply say, okay, this is not my job. It's not as good as what I do. But people are obviously keeping an eye on this stuff a lot more closely. And so this is against the background of GPT-3 and 4 coming out. And it's like, really, that's all you have to do to get to AGI? It's like, this is not a super complex thing. There are lots of, the attention models. If I remember correctly, that came out in 2017 with a paper, reinforcement learning. It's like, that's all you need. Just throw a whole lot of data at something. It's just statistics. Like, where is the grand theory? Where is the amazing academic leap of the theory of everything for intelligence? And it's not there. It's just predicting the next word, right? How do you reconcile that? I think there was a really good slide when I came here last time, and it was like data science and machine learning or artificial intelligence on a time series graph, and the y-axis was interest, and then there was ChatGPT, straight up in a right angle, and it's like, is that the inflection point? Is that really what it is? And for me, it occurred to me a while ago that predicting the next word was kind of a good problem, because I didn't come up with transformers. I'm not a neural net guy, right? But predicting the next word is a really good problem because there's just so many labels, right? And a statistical model tends to work for me. So in this talk, I want to talk about, I'm not going to talk about how to augment attention models, but there is an analogy to be drawn between the way that I've approached data science and the success of the GPT and language models in general. So why listen to me? So apart from all this startup stuff, I got bored doing startups, and I started to get really hooked on corporate data and their interesting stuff. So I did, for 5 years, I did sort of consulting to boards and to founders. If it's a big company, it might be a couple of levels below the board, but at least the CEO gets to see the stuff. And I was getting a day rate, not at your $7 grand a day, Big Four, but also much more than what a recruiter could get you. So I don't think many people in this room want to be a consultant, but I think there are still things to learn about the way that I approach data science, which is quite different, that customers saw as valuable. So I got asked just before here, how did you find clients? And I never had that problem. The clients came to me. It was all referral because I was doing something different to all the other data scientists. Is it that so I'm going to run through usual like predictors of success. Did I have a wonderful team behind me? I do now, though I'm back in startup, but back then, it was just me, just alone coding. I'd do everything, see the client. It was end to end, just me. There was no team. Maybe I'm super, super smart. No, not really. So here is the distribution of IQ. IQ on the x-axis here. So I would be somewhere, obviously, I'm not going to say I'm dumb, but I'm definitely part of the visible blue there. So I'm maybe like, I don't know exactly, but I would probably be like a top 10% kind of guy, looking at my TER and other similar metrics. So I'm like your average smart person, basically. There will be definitely people in this room that have way higher IQs than me. Like, if when it comes to a puzzle, you guys might be way better than me. Did I work really hard? So I was just watching this TikTok video yesterday, and there was this guy going from building to building in the eastern suburbs asking, how did you get to be so rich? And everyone answered, hard work. I can't say that's true in my consulting. What I learned early on was patience was much more important than hard work. And it was actually more beneficial to take lots of time off and rethink things. So if there were challenges, to just go for a bushwalk and recontemplate. And I did not work many hours, like 30, 40 hours a week, pretty standard sort of stuff. It definitely wasn't that I was putting in, like, and customers also, unlike in startup, where you've got people all over the world, consulting here, people didn't even want, they didn't care that you weren't available outside business hours. Maybe I'm just like really academic, you know, I've got great PhDs and I've got great links to the community. Tom Osborne there was my lecturer, and I'm pretty sure there was no reason to pay attention to me back then. I was a completely average student, nothing special at all. And yeah, so, you know, I have a computer science degree. Yes, I did a data science elective, but yeah, nothing, I'm just a graduate. Another great angle, obviously, is to get in with the cloud platforms, right? So if they're spending millions and millions of dollars, then what is it to spend a couple of $100,000 on a project for some clever consultant that can tie in this super expensive vendor with some data science solution? So there have been offers I've had to do some sort of like demos to show that that they need to move from Google Cloud Platform to AWS in order to prove the thing, and I wasn't particularly interested. So for me, I just run Jupyter Notebooks on whatever they want to, like, you can get Jupyter Notebooks on all of these ones, so it doesn't bother me. Yeah, so productionalization is another area that's challenging. So to actually get that out, to worry about all the process and all those sort of IT problems, a lot of respect for people that do that. I never bothered, so I drew the line at GitHub. I refused to be part of any repository. That point, that I'm an IT guy, so that's like, hey, I'm a consultant, I'm out. Maybe, am I like really big into neural nets and the latest stuff? No, I tended to my approach was to go for the simplest model I could. So there were times where people would say, I want more accuracy, but the thing that I did to get the accuracy was almost never machine learning engineering. That would be like 5% of what I did. And the recruiters would say you need every skill. So recruiters were out of my league in terms of day rate anyway. Yeah, I mean, I would only cover off like the databases so that I could query them, and Python and Jupyter and pandas, scikit-learn. Obviously, I had to chuff out to Tableau or whatever occasionally. I had to endure Mongo for a time, but my goal was never to learn lots of techs. And I guess that, yeah, obviously, like, if you guys are often working for IT, so you don't have the luxury of doing this. But for me, because I wasn't working for IT, I got to dictate my own technology. So, but anyway, that wasn't the reason of my success. It's not like you can impress every recruiter if you have every technology. I didn't bother. And no, I don't have some other alter ego as a non-geek where I get to know the board really well and I play golf, or I don't have like a dad who connects me to all the right people. There's no ASX 200 people in the family. So that's ruled out for me. And I also didn't have any like management consulting vibe. I didn't have any like program. I didn't have any particular way of running a business that I was trying to sell, except for just simply being scientific, just like doing things from first principles. Networking. So this is about as much networking as I do standing here right now. I don't know lots of people. I forget people's names and faces. Maybe there's a slight autism going on there. I don't know. Sales is another thing. So obviously there are amazing people in the co-working space where I am right now, just across the road, that can like really nail the sales process, and a lot of respect for people that know when to walk away from an enterprise client and when it's worth having another 10 meetings in order to get an amazing sale. But my approach was always, I just tell them up front, you get one meeting. And if you don't go for this, occasionally I'd give a second meeting if there turned out to be another economic buyer. But otherwise I would just be like, no, you get the one meeting and then we can go on the clock. That's all there is. So I had no patience for sales. Another really great important thing is to obviously integrate deeply into the client to ensure that these models actually work. Obviously, all these people in this photo have special roles. There's a product manager and the designer, and they all have different ways of thinking of things, and all of that patience, more of a business intelligence function to some degree, is like making sure everyone gets it and they can make that leap to start caring about some other data that they wouldn't previously. Great work, but I never bothered doing it. So the reason that I was able to get this referral business is simply because my models worked better. It was just as simple as that. Like if you wanted accurate models, you went to me, or if you wanted more strategic stuff. I'm not saying that I'm this genius. I just had this one special trick that I want to give to everyone in this room. And so my models, so either I would make a prototype model. I call it a prototype, but it was actually like provable. And then the IT people would go and productionalize it, or I would just provide insights and show what data was actually important. And it was very simple. It's like, this thing moves the needle by 50%, and that thing is only that you're worried about is only 5%. So why are we worried about the 5% thing? So how did I get here? So microburbs, going back to the year 2014, I had this idea that people wanted nice property reports, and you wanted to have scores, livability scores, like a HIP score and a family score. And so I went to the literature and looked up like gentrification, like university people, they must know about like how to identify other hip university people, these inner city, Sydney Uni, that I'm sure there's got to be great literature on how they define themselves as opposed to everybody else. But actually it was pretty like applying the literature and trying to do some rule-based solution didn't work very well. So it just looked clunky. You can't see quite here, but like if you just see in that corner there is a line where it suddenly gets a lot less hip, and people in the area assure me that it's true, that is the less hip. That there is a dividing line with that particular road. That was machine learning at work. It wasn't, I didn't come up with that idea that it needs to go across that line. So what I did was I just surveyed a whole lot of people, asked them things like, is your area trendy? Are there lots of unique things to do that you can't get in other places? And aggregated that data and then built a model for HIP score based on a few like known things that the academics would talk about, like one car households and proximity to CBD, but it was still pretty weak. But what I found was that if I just kept on adding more and more data to it, because I love to collect data, it just got ever more accurate. And it's like, everyone would tell me, oh, you need to use this model, that model. I'm like, no, I don't. I can just do like a simple random forest, and I can just keep on adding more and more sources. And that's what got me to these really powerful livability scores. So what's going on here? So basically, I think this applies for human decision-making. It's a rather small field, I know, but human decision-making is complex. There's a large number of things that go into a human decision. So I consulted to a fast food mob, and it's like, does someone go into their store again? Well, is there a competitor store nearby? Where did they go to school? Are they hungry? Is it raining? There's a whole lot of things going on. And simply being, I know for most data scientists, they're just fed the data that they're given by IT. And that is never going to get you as far. All of this machine learning engineering, which is, lots of very sophisticated stuff, it doesn't go as far as just adding more data sources. So I was just the guy you could go to because I had lots of data on lots of stuff. So you could just go, hey, I'm trying to predict this. And if it had a geospatial, so everything was, I'm not a guy that, I'm not tracking individuals and I don't know what you had for lunch. But in terms of like mapping to geospatial stuff, that was my thing. So if you were trying to do a retention model or something, from the first transaction, I could just knowing your address, I could tell a whole lot about you and how likely you are to come back. So the reality is, inside these companies, the client only has a small segment of the customer's brain. They might have surveys, they've got transactions, they might have web analytics, they might not be integrated, but that's a very small part of what makes their customers their customers. So often they've made quite simple assumptions. They might have like basic personas, you know, here are the hip families in the city and here are the struggling people out in the burbs, all these stereotypes, and they take those stereotype personas, let's call them, not stereotypes, from client to client. And they work to a degree and they're good for communication, but if you're actually trying to predict an outcome, you're better off giving this to the machine to solve with a very large amount of data. So particularly features. So yeah, my goal was always to bridge that gap. So I mentioned fast food. So I worked for a fast food mob and found that for every extra year of education they had, the customer lifetime value decreased 15%. And that like blew everything else away. So it's like, why do you ask about income? Why do you ask about all this other stuff? You just need to know, and when I say years of education, I'm starting from like year 7, yeah? People who left school then, if you get to year 8, that's bad news for them. If you get to year 9, it's worse news, yeah? Forget about uni graduates. Why try marketing to them, right? It was just really clear from the data. I could also do things like, as they tried to hit new markets, I could compare, even for like a broad ad campaign, I could compare the delta for the different demographics, what would happen. So certain groups would not like, there was certain like, there was some controversy about something not being right for certain ethnicities, and I was able to report on, yes, it was true for these particular ones, particularly if they had these sort of socioeconomics. In real estate, so my job these days is forecasting the real estate market. What suburbs should you buy into? This is something I found in the first iteration of microburbs. So buyers agents will look on a map and say, oh yeah, there's the train station. Or they'll drive in, they go, yep, train station, tick. I'm gonna add this to my spreadsheet. This is another tick box. If it meets this as well as 4 other criteria, I'm gonna put it into my investment grade potential, yeah? And my model had this and 70,000 other features, proximity to train station, and I found it wasn't using it. I was like, is there something wrong? It makes intuitive sense to me that that kind of proximity would be useful. Is it the train station's tuck shop or something? And it's just using that instead. It could have used either. No, what it was doing was it was looking at the census and looking at whether people actually commute with the train. So this, I believe, what station is this? Hopefully, Artarmon, good. Yeah, Artarmon, this is an example of a train station that not every train stops at, yeah? So the Chatswood would be a much better train station to be next to because it's a hub. So way more people who live near Chatswood actually make use of that thing. So you start to, having way more features gives you way more insight into what is actually valuable. And I found it fascinating because you could rethink the world. There's a million things that people talk about and you go, actually, that's not the driver. There's other things going on that you don't think about. Another common thing I would do is for franchise groups, I could build models to work out the actual predicted customer lifetime value if they actually did have stores in that area. So a classic thing would be they're big in Melbourne and they tried rolling out to Sydney and it's not working. The founder's not there. They went out to the same suburbs and the growth plans have fallen, or it's the other way around. And then I'm like, well, Sydney and Melbourne are diverse cities. maybe it's not about Sydney and Melbourne, maybe it's about the kinds of people in the particular parts. And yeah, so we found time and time again that the target markets are much more specific than what the marketing people think they are. So it won't be, I did a beer delivery mob and they were like, oh, it's just high-end people. And it's people who live near the city. And it turned out that the big thing for them was group household composition. So you wanted group households of high-income people. So basically it was like share a fridge, it turned out to be, right? So if you don't own the fridge, then you don't buy cases of beer and stock up. You need beer at the last minute. So yeah, I don't want to make this too much about consulting because probably most people in this room don't want to be consultants, but I was able to get over the usual objections to consultants and create new objections, of course. But I wasn't there to apply some arbitrary management philosophy. I was just there, let's just look at the numbers. I didn't, so there's a thing, oh, he doesn't understand our business. It doesn't really work. So in franchise groups, there's a lot of tension between the head office and the actual franchisees out in the burbs and out in regional Australia. And they're saying, oh, this new thing this new spicy thing that you think my customers are going to eat, they're just going to spit it out where they're going to return it. Yeah. And so, yes, I had, obviously, you're a consultant, you're going to piss people off. That's part of the job. But I had allies. I knew that I had allies in the actual frontline people because they were seeing it every day. So it was like the data was actually, it's similar to like, they were, what I was doing was similar to actually walking into the stores where the actual customers were and looking what they actually bought, as opposed to applying some new abstract philosophy of like, this is where the world's moving to. So yeah, frontline people, growth hackers were also good people to work with because they're actually at the coalface of trying stuff out. Management consultants are good as well, actually, I have to say. Yeah, I would never start with a desired decision and work backwards. I wasn't there to prove that, make a nice 50-page PDF with my brand on it. Wasn't as good a brand as Quantium and PricewaterhouseCoopers. I wasn't there to do that. It was just, I'm just going to follow the data. I'll just see where it goes. And you don't have to present this straight to the board. You can like pick the slides that you like. That's fine. So instead of having this big fancy report with a whole lot of unfalsifiable statements, it's like, oh, your competitors are moving this way. You structured your organization in last year's way. This year's way is to do it this way. I would be like, look, I'm very happy to sit down with anybody. I could well have made mistakes. But like I can go through exactly how I came with this. Let's open up the Jupyter notebooks. I'm happy to code in front of you. So anyway, what's this all got to do with GPT? How did I get this? How do I work in this generative model hook to fill a room? Well, the thing is, it is also a generalized model and it's also just statistics, yeah? So I'm not here to sell you on some great new way, some great new machine learning modeling. It's just what works. So obviously it's read way more than anybody before. So none of this was very surprising to me. So I offer this A as an analogy for the way that I've done things, but also B as an opportunity for data scientists to not necessarily become consultants, but hey, why don't you start using other data sources? You might be in IT and you don't have access to the marketing data or the finance data, or your boss doesn't want you to use it because that's the bad database and we have the good database. But if you bring in some neutral third-party database, and what I can tell you is that public data is higher quality than private data. So it goes through a lot more checks, but before someone wants to put something out publicly, and I would say that's true even for the aggregation of the data that we've collected and the synthetic data as well, because we're prepared to put it out in public. So yeah, even though, so yeah, it's just a whole lot good training data. So there's a little plug part of the thing. So basically, I want to make this database. I've been collecting all this data for a long time, and I've been updating it now with my new team. And now I want to make it available for anyone to do what I have done. So You don't have to be learn how to talk to CEOs, but what you might be okay with using an API. So if you want to, if you've got something, it has to be have a geospatial element to it. So it might be a latitude, a longitude, an address, a postcode, a suburb, an LGA. With that, you can add a hell of a lot of features to your model, and I guarantee you, you'll win. Like I never had a situation where a machine learning engineer beat me on any model with a geospatial element to them. Like I'm sure some of them are really smart and they thought about a lot of stuff and they knew about the customer their employer way better than I knew this customer when I came in for like a 2-week stint. Yeah, but not, in fact, it was very rare that they would even want to challenge me. They kind of already knew that having more features, you would win. So it's like most of the time it wasn't even a competition. So yeah, we collect data on everything, anything we can find. If we can put it to a geospatial dimension, demographics, tax, nearby amenities, we've got a huge number of them. So we look at the distances between them, health, household composition, the built up environment, zoning, yeah, any kind of building restrictions, property listings, education, housing stock. We've got consumption patterns on the way, any geographic level, and its time series from 1990 to 2023. You can check out microburbs and get a taste of the kind of stuff we have. We've got these beautiful choropleth maps that you too can generate with generated data. Make a model to show a beautiful map of any other city in Australia where your client hasn't been to yet, and show where they're going to be making their money. People love maps. Why is this good? Well, one thing is we're not getting into the whole personal identification stuff. I don't collect data from clients. I always delete the data. I'm a good little data scientist, unlike some businesses starting with Q. And obviously it's cheap to introduce. I'm not big enough to work out how to lock you in. And yeah, it's easy to trial stuff out. So you might not need that much sign off to use an API. Maybe it's your boss's credit card and it's not a purchase order. I don't know. Come and tell me afterwards if that makes sense. And yeah, so you can get around a lack of data from other parts of your organization. So yeah, circumvent the political issues. And yeah, so without deep business integration, we are geeks here. We don't want to learn these corporations ins and outs. We don't want to play the politics. You can just get much better models that work better, that tell amazing stories, that you can control for a whole lot of things that your enemies think are important. You say, look, controlling for that your thing doesn't matter. And yeah, so out of it, you get strategic insights, territory valuation, better any kind of model that has a geospatial element to it, acquisition, retention, and yeah. So yeah, all you need is credit card, a table, a matrix or whatever with suburbs or postcodes or addresses, and yeah, go ahead with your favorite. So add the features, do some modeling, use your favorite model, and consult with them which ones they accept. Obviously, a lot of people look at it and they go, oh, yeah, I don't understand that thing. Sometimes causation in the mind of the client is just correlation plus pre-existing belief, which is fine. And make your model, defeat your rivals, get promoted, get a better job. That's it. Is there time for questions, or we've got to keep moving? All right.
I actually really enjoyed that because it confirms so many of my own biases. But my question is, when you did the surveying to see which suburbs were hip and which were not, how did you actually do the survey? I'm guessing you didn't door knock.
No, it was an online survey. So it was a composite of various things available at the time. So yeah, there was a mix of things that we did to get that out. So we were controlling for various things and mixed it all in together.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, similar question, I guess, around the data gathering. How up to date is the data? How are you continuing to gather it and sort of that whole problem?
Yeah, so microbursts used to be known as the really out of date site because I stopped doing it and started consulting just so that I could make this speech for you today. And yeah, but now we're very much into, so there's a new site, it's the top search box, and so we're working with what government will give us and what we can, but the sources that we are gathering, there's a hell of a lot of 2023 data, and we're working on inferring, so making synthetic variables to keep everything up to date, even when the government doesn't make it up to date. That's part of the we're hiring bit, by the way. So if you want to work on that problem, you want to fill in missing values on an extremely large and sometimes sparse data set, to come talk to me.
Thanks for the talk. Very interesting and very inspirational. My question is this data only limited to Australia, or do you have other regions and countries as well?
Just Australia. We're extremely good for public data in this country. Not many people know this, but we're like among the best in the world. There's us, the UK, and Taiwan. If you go to the Open Data Index, you'll learn that like it's not an index in like the Academy Awards where it's like a voting panel. They're very empirical about how they judge open data. So they look at all these different aspects and all these different sectors of the economy. So it's a very thorough appraisal of how open the data is. And yeah, it's extremely good in this country. I haven't met anyone who knows all the data. It's just too much.
Just a bit of follow-up. Do you have intention of expanding out your method, or is there a methodology here that part of your business model is expanding out to other regions?
Yes, but I haven't conquered Australia yet first. So first we take Manhattan, then we take Berlin.
Good answer.
Thanks, Luke. One question I had is, are you predicting house prices currently or in the future? And
Yes.
yes. And how have you tested those against your competitors like realestate.com?
That's a good question. So I'm not up on the latest with realestate.com.au, but I can tell you in general in the property industry, people don't trust the machine fully. Maybe, yeah, you might know different, but from what I've seen of models, there's sort of a hybrid thing. So mine are back tested and I want them to work in any market is a particular interest of mine. It's not like I don't want to be biased by one particular boom. I think I would be using way more data than what most people would use for this problem. We have tens of millions of data points. And yeah, so I'm very into doing very deep scans for stuff.
Cool, thanks. And one other one, I see you have interviews with Channel 7, Channel 9. I'm sure there's a lot of people here in the room aspiring to have their own companies that can get that far. So how did you manage to land those interviews?
Again, they came to me. I didn't do anything. In fact, microbursts was kind of dormant at the time. It was like a year or two after I was working on the site. I had moved on to consulting, and I got contacted by one of them, and then the other one must have seen a promo, and then they had to do it within a day.
Oh.
So yeah, I'm not much the sales guy. I just wait for people to come to me.
Place to be, I guess.
I might ask a question as well. Are all Australians the same?
No.
Or do you notice any quirky things about different states?
States. Yeah, so states is something that clients want to hear about. They want to know about like territory level stuff. But I can't, yeah, so these boundary kinds of questions, I see everything as like a gradation. Everything's a continuum. Nothing changes when you go. I mean, I don't think Albury is a totally different economy to Wodonga. Yeah, maybe there are different number plates, but I don't think it's a totally different kind of person. So I've never seen borders as that important. It's not with real estate. It's not like suddenly prices change when you go over a suburb border. And sometimes they will lie about which suburb it's in. They'll go for other ones. I mean, there is a very big difference between metropolitan Australia and regional Australia. So yeah, and the customer is usually in Metro Australia that they understand quite well. And a lot of my work is in trying to get people across the idea that there's a very different life. You go to TAFE, you start your family younger. You know, you might be in chronic pain from an injury or something. There is quite a class divide in Australia, and it's not just who you see in your own metropolitan, but there's a whole other world as you go further out, different problems and a different mindset. And so in this way, this kind of approach really helps companies understand the diversity of their user base, and not just in the diversity in the usual way that I think about it.
One more question. Thanks. A quick question on access to internet. So picking up on your
Yes,
comments there about
I have it.
regional Australia.
Would you like some? I can share.
Thanks for that. But the regional versus metropolitan. So I've moved up to the Hunter Valley since COVID. The infrastructure there and the class divide is very different. But in terms of access and understanding, do you see is internet access and speed features that you're?
Yes, we have it. Yes, it's part that is in the pipeline. Yeah, so we have it, and it's being assimilated at the moment. So yes, it would be there. Another point I'd like to make is that in regional Australia, there is more a difference between rich and poor. So if you go to like a country town, it's very distinct. So you've got like the landowners, these big farms, and there's like working poor or underclass in the town. And that's a different vibe to what you have in the metropolis.
I think that's pretty much it. Oh, please join me. Thank you. And we'll have our customary 5 or so minute break. And then we'll hear from Tom Osborne.
I'm also
They're all.
Lacey.
Oh, right.
You know, we've had a
Yeah, mate. Man, I'm working hard, bro.
And even then, I would mostly only just tune the depth. And that's enough for me.
So just interesting. Remind me. Usually it comes a week or later.
Sure. So that might even be an API call.
Then the other side of it.
If we start to embed the machine, and not just people that
Mostly
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's probably some variables you should be covered.
Yeah, I should have mentioned, like, using random forest,
Yeah, that's right.
having other data sources, and it's sort of like, yeah. Hey, that's not the game. You have to work with the same. Everyone's got the same iris data set. Everyone's got the same Titanic data set.
Yeah, and the board.
personal connection is more important.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, just seeing.
So I don't. We'll probably have to start throwing things.
Also, it's price at the moment. Price is relative to that first.
All those same shops are up
group there. You just lose them.
Yeah.
I think it's also.
Yes, very occasionally I'll go to like something almost never worth the effort.
Aldi's right outside.
Okay, it's
I think your next session.
problem, and I only have price, and I only have this, and I only have that, and I just want to tune that.
Yeah.
It's a culture. It's almost trying to capture the culture. Yeah. So if you capture the culture, in some way.
Well, actually, I'm.
With the price of real estate. Did you find like a difference there? Like, where were you living before? In the ocean.
Well, then, yeah, so random forest is pull the trees and that's the gradient boosting. It can give a bit of it's more hassle and it's slower.
And then yeah, contact me.
Yes, it's on our website.
Spend all my time is just spent and trying to work. It's very.
You travel up and down.
I'm not. They sell them.
Actually, I'm about to move down here permanently.
Yeah, I think so as well.
I'm used to it. No, so it's been interesting. I still have a
Right, yeah. I'm
You're always entertaining.
been
You came in a cave one time.
not quite as
yeah, for millennium. So you're right, I got there and it will still be there later. I don't have a lot. Done it. I had to work for that. Sure. It's just please.
You should find me.
Which is why I was the same as well.
Yeah, right.
Oh, well, I think what happened with those factors, like the same areas, they had, you know, the same factors with driving those things in the other states.
So I think it's good.
So the other thing is the level of training,
What remote is
Company society. How long have they been in Australia? Those are
Stuff like that looks right in place. So surely you could use that.
the biggest factor.
But it doesn't seem like
Are there many people in Australia?
Like,
Most
basically,
right.
So, and she said, yes, you should do that. Suburbs. And I said, define first time
right.
thing.
So are they
Australian.
choosing their stuff?
Interesting. The thing is, she's ways and yeah, most people I'll tell you.
Well, no, it's only
We've read that very version of them.
Yeah, right.
You always stop it around because you know.
Very diverse part of the
Yeah.
He does that.
There's no jobs around.
She's the
only ones where you get
Yeah.
You don't want to drive.
It's my dad's mate.
Yeah, that was very informative. You know
Tattoos, you don't have tattoos.
train stations are
So much happening.
Much free.
like
Anyway, I'm Bill.
born in Shenzhen. One of my time here.
Problem is,
A lot of these ones are more general. I have done that in the past. That's my mother's
Sending you a message.
because they're halfway.
I'm going to do Bill's trick. Does that work?
Oh my goodness, they did the opposite. Thank you. So you got only differs.
So now I'm wondering if there's someone in the Institute of Actuaries who's actually taking note of how much pizza is left. I mean, you know, it's a multivariate data set, right? There are different flavors, there's a different amount, and it's a time series. And I'm sure there are people very interested in whether there'll be any left over, and so what kind. So yeah, I'm very curious who gets to do that time series task, and I'm sure there's lots of debate. Are you using a reamer, using exponential smoothing? No, I'm using a neural net. Maybe not, maybe not. But on to much more important things. And I was going to say much more pleasant things. Pizza's a pleasant thing, but this is even more pleasant because there aren't many more greater pleasures in this whole introducing people thing than you know, you don't often get to introduce someone who's pretty much responsible for the foundations of everything you know. But the person I'm introducing now, I'm a little biased. He's my PhD supervisor, and also for quite a long time my martial arts instructor. So yes, he has a PhD in physics and a 5th degree black belt, I believe, in Hwarang Do. And that's only one of the martial arts that he does, so don't mess with Tom. But yeah, once again, one of those introductions that isn't going to get read off, and very heartfelt indeed. And I have to say that Tom, who's had a distinguished academic career followed by a decades-long real-world career, not a lot of people can say that, while also maintaining his strong links with academia, including multiple PhD students over that period, and currently, including one who's about to graduate. He's not here today. He's not here. He was going to be. I should also say that Tom has touched a number of lives as a teacher, as a mentor, as an advisor. And I can see Luke, who's had Tom as a teacher, and Ryan, who's had Tom as a teacher, and both these gentlemen have one a serial entrepreneur, one, if I may tell folks, a successful private equity investment person who's retired this week. So learning from Tom, not a bad idea. And Tom has also gone on to have a very interesting and distinguished career in applying machine learning, data science, critical thinking, you know, thinking from first principles to problems in business. And today he's going to tell us about one of several businesses that I think he's the intellectual heart of, and the one that looks like it's going to become a unicorn. This one's again. You don't think so, Tom? Unicorns are dead. All right. Pick a mythical beast. Tom's been telling me about this business on and off and what he's doing with it, and it all sounded absolutely amazing. So I think we're going to be very privileged to hear from Tom and what he's been doing with active learning to fix broken corporates at Epiphany. Over to you, Tom.
Let's get started. Where's the arrows? Yeah. So, motivating slide. My name is Bosch, and that's meant to be a corporate business entity. Chaos. To add to that. Big. So that may be me, that may be some of us here. And Pepper Big's thinking and observing and reaching conclusions. So there's your motivation. The rest of it might be a bit more boring. I'll try not to be like a lecturer, but I have habits from a long time ago. So statement of the problem. Diagnosing and fixing businesses. Some businesses fail, maybe yours. Some businesses don't fail, but failing is not a good point to know about. It's before that point. And the real thing, and this is actuaries like this word as well, the real aspect that we're focusing on is mitigating the risk of failure. It's important to know that there's some probability that a business may die. And if you can do something about that before it happens, then it doesn't die. That's a good thing. There's also some businesses that may be at risk of dying, but they don't actually die. Well, that's just one of the problems of having a probabilistic situation. So the questions are not about failure and non-failure. It's about what are the risks of the failure and how do you find them and how do you fix them. So that's why I'm here, because Epiphany started about 5 or 6 years ago, which I'll tell as we go through the whole talk, but it was to deal with this basic core business problem of business failures. So conventional answer about how do you deal with this situation, and that's to hire some very high-end business consultants, management consultants, the big four or big four plus the other two, and a bunch of other ones that are more narrowly specialized. The people that came to me with this problem said, we don't want to do that because we can't. And also because we've heard of this thing called AI, which means we might be able to do the job of identifying business risks of failure. So my standard approach to being approached like that was to say, yeah, of course, it can be done. Where do we start? So the other answers to the question are wait and see, which basically means do nothing until it's too late, or to solve it for yourself, which is one way people get a lot of experience at knowing what to avoid the next time round when they stuff things up, or to use AI. And the problem here is about what AI, and this is where Luke and I are talking about completely different problem spaces, because he's got a shitload of data and he gets more every day, and it's just there, so he can take it and put it in his system, and the random forest or whatever will chomp it up and turn it into something informative and useful and predictive. Understanding a business entity, like we had on the previous slide, isn't anything like that. So Epiphany uses a specific kind of AI that is from machine learning. It's a bit uncommon, and it's called active learning. So it's a branch of machine learning from reinforcement learning, and a particular kind of reinforcement learning where you don't have much data, but you've got a chance to go and get more data to let you build models. The trouble is that data is costly. So how are you going to find out stuff using not much data, but you're allowed to go and get more? So active learning is an approach for dealing with that. I should say right now that there's another kind of active learning that's used in education, which is where the students are allowed to participate in their own learning by deciding what they want to investigate. Right. That's a fabulous and good thing most of the time. It can lead into anarchy, but it often leads into genuine curiosity and ability to explore children have. I'm not going to talk about that anymore because it's got nothing to do with the talk. So the active learning is the AI part. There's a second AI part that comes in on top of this bit, which is the way I want to understand the business is mainly by asking questions of the people who work in the business. because they have their understandings of the company that they work for. So it sounds like running surveys, but it's absolutely not, because active learning turns a survey into something that's really an interrogation system, where after you've asked a couple of questions, active learning determines what direction and what questions you're going to ask next, not follow through the standard script of a typical questionnaire. So that goes from using a question bank, which I'll talk about, I think, next. That's stolen from the minds of expert management consultants, who it's even been done to Ryan. He may not have even known it was being done to him, but it's about, we'll get to it. It's about collecting as many questions as you can that might be useful sometimes in diagnosing a business. And then we want to engineer those questions so that the AI can exploit those questions. Third part is standard model building, and that's, we want to model the risk so that we can store some categories of risk, which is essentially around leadership, around people, and around operations. So very standard aspects of the structure. Something a little bit more detailed is breaking that into 6 elements, and then taking those one step further to where we find problems in a way that can be fixed. That's 24 actionable factors about what's buggered basically in the business, because some people have decided they can tell you that. And that's, epiphanies in the middle of that. It's not really a Venn diagram because I haven't filled in the other 3 triangles or the outside, but I tried. So the active learning asks questions, the questions get stolen from the question bank. The answers to the questions, they are scored by a process that we've developed. That then goes back to inform the active learning when it works out, what do you want to ask the subject, the victim, the suspect, the next question. So that's all straightforward. And then the rest of it is, how would we possibly do that? So a working definition of active learning: if data is scarce or expensive or disruptive to obtain, active learning selects which data to obtain to build the best models at lowest cost. So I'm completely in the opposite universe to Luke, because he just takes it and uses it all, whereas I can't even get the data without a fair bit of pain. If there's any statisticians in the room, this is sometimes called optimal experimental design, and it's possibly a branch of important sampling, which is a way of sampling data that doesn't say use everything, but just use selectively, because it gives you the most useful model rather than the most precise model. The active learning selects data points to label. So the target values when you're building predictive models. And that can also be that it works out which questions to ask so that you will get the answer. And an answer to a question is like a label to a data point. Yep. And the users or the oracles or the employees of the business and so on, they do the labeling, they answer the questions. But it's costly, because is there anyone in this room who likes filling in surveys? No. I didn't intend you to answer that. CEOs and board members and senior executives don't like their time being wasted at all. They're quite happy to pay Deloitte or PwC or BCG, I won't say how much, a lot of money for a 10-week analysis of their business to generate a PowerPoint presentation. But we're not interested in that. We're interested in each person having an experience of being interrogated without using the word interrogate that lasts for maybe 30 minutes, maybe even less than that. That gives a deep insight to their understanding of weaknesses and gaps in a business. So let me interrupt myself. Business consultants, strategic planners, they'll often do an analysis called a SWOT analysis. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So we throw away thinking about the strengths and the opportunities and only look at the weaknesses and the threats, because that's where you find the risks to the business, the risk of failure. So active learning does exist. You find it in medicine. And this is where it's expensive to treat a patient and give them a lot of tests. You want to ask a small number of tests. An unguided doctor will have an intuition that tells them to test for 3 or 4 different pathology tests or something like that. But there are medical support systems that take that further and give guidance on which way to go. And if you get an answer that all the tests come back with negatives, where do you look to next? You run out of a GP's expertise and you go to a specialist, and sometimes you need a global specialist to take you further. It's also, active learning is also in things like remote robotics, the Mars lander, which it takes 8 to 20 minutes to get a message from Earth to the Mars lander and the return trip, to tell it to move it over and avoid that rock. So you want the Mars lander to be able to explore the planet in a way that doesn't destroy the Mars lander and takes it to somewhere interesting where it can explore and learn something about the planet, rather than finding, oh, there's another pile of grey dust. Deep sea is the same kind of environment. Communicating to deep sea is harder than communicating to spacecraft. A lot harder. It's also used in computer vision, natural language processing, and in Epiphany. The costs that I've mentioned already, they could be about life and death. They could be, in medicine especially, they could be about dollars. That's in medicine as well. Case management has a cost, as well as morbidities and mortalities. It could be about having limited communication, like the Mars landers problem. It could be about bias reduction. And this is, luckily for Luke, he's got this whole country to spread his data across and build models. But sometimes if you've got too much data of one kind and not enough of another, you get a bias from the data you've got too much of. That makes you sharper about one kind of prediction, and it loses some of the importance. So active learning sometimes used to avoid using all of your data in all of the data space. You'll subsample some of it and maybe oversample other parts of it. Or in our case, the time for executives and busy staff to sit down and answer a survey, or what they think is a survey. For the mathematically inclined here, and I guess that's more than half the people in the room, the core of active learning is an optimal policy about exploring and exploiting a model that you're trying to build that isn't perfect, and also resolving uncertainty and inconsistencies, both in the data and in the prediction of the model, to give you a best model. I'll tell you now, because I might overuse my time here. The best model is also one that is developed well enough that it finds what you need to find about what's wrong with the business. Not one that asks thousands of questions. So our active learning, it builds a model on the fly using the questions that are answered already, or actually using the answers of the questions which have been scored. The on-the-fly model is pointing to business issues, gaps, and risks. The on-the-fly model doesn't get it right because it's only using a small amount of data. And then the active learning comes and says, what next to ask, until you get to a stable model of the status of the business in terms of its risks. So if I created suspense, there are some results coming up, which are a bit obscured for obvious reasons. The algorithms form, the parameters, the termination conditions were developed by me in the early days, basically doing simulations of questionnaires or questions where all the questions were asked, or a large number of questions were asked, and we didn't want to ask them all. We wanted to know which ones to forget about because they're not relevant to taking a business apart. But where do we get the questions? And we got questions basically by asking people to tell us what questions they typically ask of a business. Simple as that. But we kept asking and asking and asking. We've got over 1,000 questions in our question bank at the moment. Some of it quite general, some are more specific, some are very narrowed. So some examples are, we've got some questions that are aimed at understanding if a strategic plan can be achieved well or not. Because every business has a strategic plan. Some of them have piss weak strategic plans, which anyone can achieve. It's called, let's keep things going along as they are and have a new website. Others have such elaborate objectives that they're not achievable. And even half of it's not achievable, but it does give a strategic direction to a business. It's probably going to burn capital trying to achieve all of those objectives. Managing digital transformation, something we get asked about a lot lately, because even the dinosaur businesses in Australia are now saying, oh, we have to use IT properly, not just we have to have an IT department. Cybersecurity is one that comes up a lot. Mergers and acquisitions is another important focus of what we do. So you're doing an M&A, you want to look at a business that you may acquire. If you know what's wrong with it, and you know whether you might be the right kind of business to fix it, it's a really good target to go for. If it's a business full of culture problems, and you don't know how to fix culture problems, let somebody else go and break their arms and legs trying to make that work. Another one that we get asked a lot lately in the last 2 or 3 years is about sustainability. So there's a big announcement I'll be making, not tonight, about that. So another recent development in the work that I've been doing with Epiphany is to be able to morph and generate novel questions from a business risk ontology. And I don't know if I want to publish that or not. So, but this would mean that we can come up with questions that are human friendly, but have never been asked before, but they are symptomatic of things that destroy businesses. Now, it may be that there's hardly any questions left beyond the 1,000 that we've got, but I doubt it. We have been looking at applying this to government departments and also applying it to agriculture. In both of those, we know that there's whole areas of questions that we haven't covered. Whereas most of the businesses that we've worked with, we think we're pretty good. We're not getting asked to deal with things that haven't been interrogated. So a few random questions from the question bank. This is to kind of insinuate that we know what we're doing and that we actually did it. So what are your high level organizational challenges? And there's a list of 8 of those. There's this also around people. There's this also around leadership. Now, remember that you probably know Deloitte has a survey question they use on these kinds of exercises. They have 24 questions that everyone gets asked. We've got 1,000 and we don't ask anywhere near all. So what's the level of confidence that the strategic objectives are the correct ones? And it's a scale question. So scale questions are sometimes painful because you've got to put in a number between 0 and 100. But we're not going to ask one person, we're going to ask a bunch of people in the company, and we can average out the inconsistencies between people dealing with scale questions. How do you verify employee alignment with company vision and with the mission? And we're not asking, do you have one? We're asking, and we're not asking, do employees verify that you're they're aware of it and aligned with it and so on. We're asking, how do you verify it? And that turned out to be a much more probing question, which we didn't invent because it came from the 4 experts that we stole information from. Are there any toxic elements affecting the culture within your business? And it's Boolean. And if the answer is yes, then it has some linked questions that follow on to that. Because if the answer is no, you don't want to keep probing in that direction. If it's using straightforward active learning, it might ask that question and then jump to a question about execution effectiveness, which might scramble the brain of the respondent. Are company KPIs on display for all to see? It's a Boolean question. So some companies do that. It's more common than it used to be. They have a big screen up and everyone walks through the door and there's the number up the top. Other companies keep that completely quiet to themselves and instead they tell fairy stories to their employees. So a couple of notes on that. The questions are asked appropriate to the people's levels in the organisation chart. So believe it or not, there's some questions the CEO shouldn't be asked because they don't know. But a middle level manager probably knows the answer to that, or a salesperson knows an answer to it. Same way there'd be questions that a middle level manager wouldn't know some numbers that a CEO might know. And just to summarize, what the questions are really trying to do, they're trying to get an individual's perceptions of the organisation, especially about what they think might be wrong with it. It doesn't mean they're right, it's what they perceive might be going wrong. So the question bank, our panel of consultants, I simply ask the question, what questions would you like to ask a new client focused on their business gaps, weaknesses and risks? And we just keep collecting those questions. After a while, you have to apply them with alcohol or something to keep the flow going on, or challenge them and then they'll justify. And we don't even ask them why they're asking a particular question, because that's part of the knowledge engineering we do later. They don't hold back. And also 2 of our founders were business consultants. One worked mainly around risk and culture, which are closely related to entities. The other one was more around the organisational information flow and processes. So, whatever people told us, we kept. We didn't throw anything away. This is in line with Luke's approach. You keep stuff, but we don't decide whether we're going to use it. We let active learning decide whether it's going to be used through that client interrogation process. And the process continues to today. Often clients will tell us a few more questions they'd like to be asked, so we just add them. Nowadays, there aren't many clients say there's something that you missed. There is one company that was probably the highest scoring, best performing company that we ran it. It was a startup, and they said you didn't ask any questions about cash flow and cash flow challenges. That was the first startup that we put through the Epiphany system as well. So we just added a few. What happens when if you lost a few major clients, or is cash flow a potential problem? Okay, and the types of questions, there's Boolean questions, there's choose one of, there's choose all applicable, scale questions, there's a few text questions. I don't like text questions because analysing them using natural language processing or AI is likely to give you some stupid conclusion sometimes. So we use the free text answers to sprinkle through the report and let people know that we were listening to them. But we have plans to understand what the free text is about. So knowledge engineering, I think I've only got 4 more key important slides. The anatomy of a question. So we all know what questions are. We went to school, we learned about questions. So we were all told they started with who, what, when, where, why, how, who, and some other things. They're called interrogative adverbs, but there's other questions that start with verbs. Sorry. I had one in that I remembered and I've forgotten it. What's more important is what are the questions about? What are the topics? And what are the attributes behind the question? So, and this is where the knowledge engineering really works. So knowledge engineering was something that in the 1990s was a big part of AI. And now AI is more moved over to, as long as the data's got semantic definitions, you don't have to worry about knowledge engineering very much. Well, here we had to understand the questions in more details because we didn't want to interpret the questions with natural language processing. We wanted to understand them in terms of what was being asked and what were the more precise elements of what was being asked. So we had, at the time, I don't know what the number is now, but we had 42 possible attributes that a question could be about. And a typical question would have had a small number of attributes that it was about. So we simply marked up the questions with its attributes using a Delphic approach. So that's from Xerox Park. No, Rand Corporation. They invented it for military decision-making and planning way back in the 1950s. And it's where you got a bunch of experts who were not afraid to argue with each other. And you asked them a question and they were allowed to disagree, but they had to keep talking until they resolved their agreements and disagreements. So we did that to come up with what is this question about and fitting it into those 42 attributes. I'm not going to tell you what those 42 attributes are. It's deep IP inside the system that makes it work. So, but if you took a few questions, you find that the questions are about a few things. An interesting aspect there is some questions are overloaded. They're about too many things. So there might be about 8 attributes. And that's a sign of a problem. The interrogator is trying to focus on too many things. So that question gets chopped into several smaller questions that have a narrower focus. And those 42 attributes are the main thing that drives the active learning. In a technical sense, they're the semantic support for interpreting questions. And the on-the-fly model and the active learning uses those. This is still on a question. I haven't said anything about answers yet. The questions then map into 3 categories that I've mentioned already, but you can't remember them. They're about leadership, about people, and about operations. The 3 key pillars of what a business is. We go a bit deeper and there's 6 elements. The elements are 2 on leadership, strategic leadership. Do people have vision and objectives and go somewhere? Behavioral leadership, are they conducting themselves well and expecting well of their employees, that kind of thing. Culture spread, are people happy? Are they engaged with the company? Do they trust each other? All those kinds of questions that come under culture. Are there any culture consultants in the room? If there aren't, I might be able to tell some jokes about them later. But culture is important in an organisation. People development, that's about, you've got staff, but are you going to make them just stay the way they are, or do you want them to progress forward and upward and to the appropriate level where they're still useful? Avoiding the Peter principle, but avoiding the boredom of not getting promotion, losing incentives to do things. Process management, processes, should be process management and execution effectiveness. So process is a thing in the business meant to deal with some work tasks. Execution effectiveness is if the process was followed, did it actually work? So that's the 6 elements. And lastly, there's 24 actionable factors, which are derived from those 6, but they're things you can do something with. Now, anatomy of an answer. So we do the same Delphic method for this, but that's to come up with a scoring method for each answer. And sometimes there's penalties if people don't answer when they should answer. It may be they don't know, maybe they don't want to tell you. Both of those are things you don't want. There's probably 8 scoring methods that we use for different questions, but they all come up with numbers between 0 and 100. Following academic traditions, 50 is a pass, 65 is you're almost competent, 75 is a distinction, so things are going well. 85 is good, but maybe too good, too excellent up there. So a business that's all full of high distinctions is probably coasting along on their brilliance, and they could probably be going twice as fast into a good direction. So these feed into that stable model ultimately, and also into the elements, and it drives the active learning. User experience. So the setup uses the CEO to say what's going on, or an MD. They'll answer some standard responses that are true of the business, like how old is the business, how big is the business, what ANZIC codes it in, some general performance numbers. Some quant data from typical corporate dashboards might be fed in, but we have to work out how to score those. Essentially, scoring is a low number is a bad thing, a high number is a good thing. There's a few universal questions that everyone sees at the beginning of their questionnaire, and that seeds the active learning. So the system has a basis on which to start exploring. So initially we tried to run it from random first question and where do you go? That turned out to be inefficient. So we started with some general questions that set up issues like that. What are your main problems with operations? Then there's analysis focus that's sometimes used. The senior leadership teams agree on that and tell us what they think. There may be a strategic plan that the company has, so we codify that, and that'll narrow the focus of the interrogations as well. Then the individuals get questioned in individual sessions. It looks like a questionnaire because they're seeing one question after another and they're asked to answer it. But it's not a questionnaire. It's more like some nasty detective that assumes they're guilty, but trying to find out what they're guilty of. And the subjects do feel stress, especially senior people in some of the companies, because it's like their dirty secret might be going to be revealed. But we don't ask dirty secrets. We only ask for business gaps and so on. And the questions might be filtered according to levels of the org chart and some nominated focuses. If the company is pretty good, the system stops after about 80 questions. That's when uncertainty about predicting those factors and elements are stable. If it's a bad company, it might stop at 150 questions. If it's a totally stuffed company, 260 questions is the record. So I'm not going to tell you who it was.
Still around?
In a manner of speaking, yes. I'll give you an example of one of their issues was they decided to respond as a group. So there were 5 people in the room responding to the questionnaire, and they agreed to what the answer would be. Now, that indicates something about their culture. And then one of the questions was, are your processes documented? And it turned out they all believed the processes were documented, except for them. The processes were in the individual minds of the directors in the company. It was an advertising agency, so director is a name that means something different in a company than on a board. So it turned out nearly everything was wrong in that business. They had a strategic director who was basically managing culture to make sure people were happy. So it didn't have a focus on the future at all. They also had issues with rework having to happen all the time. Yep. So the more questions are asked, the more problems the business has. And then once this 20 minutes or so has taken place, the individual can view their own reports. And I think there's one more slide. So who sees those reports? The individual and maybe their line manager and maybe some people above that. The team members may share the reports if they're in a team and they want to see if they're similar to each other, maybe not, could be a sensitive issue. So the individual reports focus on the 6 elements and the 24 actionable factors and priority areas of concerns and problem areas. And here's the first example. I deliberately made the thing unreadable so that the really weak part in this particular one was leadership. The second line is around people and it's pretty bad, and operations was a little bit better. But basically this is terrible. And behavioral leadership was worse than everything else. So it meant it was being run without much strategic leadership, but the behavior of the leaders was even worse. So, which probably explained the other things that were going wrong. And we'll get to that when I get to it. But here's the 24 actionable factors. Again, deliberately a bit unreadable. So the 2 leadership things, they look quite consistent across their actionable factors. But when we come down to the one that's in the middle, the 67, the motivation to excel is an extremely low number. So, and that has a knock-on effect in some of the culture and some of the operations. This is just to give you an impression of what the person's experiencing. If I got everyone in this room to do one of these about your business, then it would be not just interesting, I guess, but it'd be meaningful as well. Here's the second one. This one's a bit better. It's still not a good company, but its people aspects, especially development of staff, is not so good. Its leadership's not too bad, but it's still not up to the distinctions level. And the operations are doing the best. So, and I'll let you know, this was one of the kinds of businesses that sell things. So there's pressure to sell, and that's why operations around the execution and processes is pretty well embedded. But the people are basically wage slaves to do the selling. This company also had a weakness in motivation to excel, and it had some other standout weaknesses. Now, these 2 examples I showed are both businesses that are in the bottom, probably 25% of the companies that we've done. Then we've got aggregated reports. This is where it starts to get interesting. We don't look at just one person at a time or group them together in the same business. So the groupings might be everybody, or the C-suite, CEO and anybody else whose title starts with C, or the board. Board questions are really tricky questions to ask as well, for reasons I won't talk about. The executives and the C-suite, or managers, or both of those together. Any task forces that are meant to make changes to the business. Various verticals in the organisation chart. Looking at new staff only, looking at old staff only, where knowledge sharing hasn't taken place. Maybe the old staff have gone off because they've been there too long. There's all kinds of reasons for looking at these things. So the net achievability score is, we know for some businesses what their strategic plan was. Now the question is, was it achievable? And the answer was, in this case, probably not. It may be that part of it was achievable, but they were being too ambitious. We then had focus factors. All these reports are configurable and dockable so that they can be made to suit given companies. Problematic, in this case, factors. The three worst things in aggregated across the company that we're looking at were motivation to excel. It's funny how that one kept coming up, but I picked these examples pretty much at random. Care factor, whether staff really care about achieving things. I guess that and motivation to excel are somewhat similar. And review and improvement. Can you do better? Misalignment, this is another interesting one. So the business had 4 factors that were significantly different from person to person than the rest. So practicality and pragmatism was something where some staff thought, yeah, we're really good at that, and others didn't. These are still green, so they're still up in the distinction level. But we get down to growth and learning, and that turned out there's some people thought, oh, everybody's learning how to do things properly and they're developing nicely. And other people saying, I've never heard of it. And I've been in debriefs, so I see the reactions to this. We're presenting not to one person at a time, so they start to fight a little bit. There's a root cause analysis in it that I won't talk about much, but it looks at some factors are root causes. The ultimate root cause is around accountability and ownership of problems, which is a senior executive level or C-suite root cause. But there's other ones that are root causes. There's symptomatic factors that are things that aren't working, because even something as boring as a dashboard can tell you that. And there's intermediate factors that link between those. So that's all the factors, but there might be only 3 or 4 paths that stand out as being weak. And the judgment is, do you want to fix a symptom, or do you want to fix a root cause, or do you want to work on something in between? We don't tell the company what to do. We'll tell them to go for whichever of the ones closest to the root cause you find that you think's achievable and it isn't going to cost you too much. And then, because we're interested in money, we say, and after you've done this, we'll come back and measure how you're going against it. And there's a few other things around looking at symptoms that might lead to motivation to excel, for example, needing a fix. The last one before the last slide is to show some misalignments here. The middle column is the CEO, and the column on the right is the CTO. They're seriously misaligned with each other, at least for these factors. And it's a sign that they really don't agree with each other. The CEO is a bit of an optimist, got a lot more green, and the CTO has a lot of red. It may be that this could be simply fixed by adjusting the organisation chart so the CTO's got more staff or more control over what they're doing, or you shoot the CEO or something like that. Now, there have been dismissals as a result of our input, but we're not telling them what to do. We're listening to what they're telling us and summarising it back. So where are we now? Epiphany is now incorporated in Ireland. It left Australia because it's Ireland's access to Europe, and it's very IT friendly, and it's going really well. The CEO and the product manager are now in Portugal, so because they prefer the climate in Portugal than Ireland. Everything's close in Europe anyway. And they're married as well, so it's all good. And the food's better in Portugal too, apparently. Chairman's in Perth. I'm in Sydney, and the developers that do the work for us are in Sydney. We've got advisors in Sydney and Melbourne and Germany, France and San Francisco and UK and Canada. one of the Sydney is a former ASIC chairman from post GFC. He's really smart. So I'm happy to answer any questions, but I can't talk about any clients by name. This is beyond what insider trading would be about, because not only do I know what's wrong with these businesses, but they don't even know that yet if they haven't seen the results. So, and that's really important inside information. So, yep.
First question is Bill.
Okay. When you look at an organization, I can imagine that there's areas which are naturally more positive and naturally, you know, negative. Like I can imagine salespeople probably everything's great, or marketing people, and then you've got the risk people, the audit people, and the actuaries who just go, like, do you allow for any of that in your models?
In the aggregated reports, we definitely group them into the natural groupings like sales and marketing, who are always telling you how good it's going to be, and the audit and financial controllers and so on will be looked at on their own. The C-suite and the executives who are really the accountable ones, yeah, they're all looked at. They can be looked at as the entire organisation, but they can be all looked at as separate groups. Something that I haven't put into the system is a clustering of staff into communities who have similar views and attitudes. I think it's a really good idea. It's just nobody's asked for us to do it yet, so it's on the back burner. It's surprising how different businesses in the same industry sector are from each other as well. And it's not always a difference of a CEO that does that either.
Thanks for the talk. I have one question, which is, in your experience in putting these questions out to people, do you have another model that sort of takes in data around what their own past experiences are, and you can assess whether the quality of the answers, or even look at?
Yeah, we don't include any psychometrics of the people or their past experience or their skill level or anything like that. But we have clients who are international recruiters who want to understand what kind of people to fill the organisation chart with, or to look at the balance of the organisation chart. And that's where the level of experience of staff comes into it. Now, we haven't tried to detect that in this system, but it's something that is part of the consulting process that flows from it. Because going and finding more staff isn't as simple as grab people. They've got to be the right people. Same reskilling or dismissing or adjusting the organisational chart structure is not something you do until you know what talent pool you can. The other thing that's sort of related to that is we also want to know what consultants should go in to fix the company's problems, because we know what the problems are. If it's Deloitte, they'll say it's a culture problem. If it's PwC, they might say it's more about processes and leadership. If you go to Bain, then it's something to do with operations. Yeah, I should have said that. And the European side of things is more receptive to these ideas. It's like CEOs, they're hungry for information about problems, whereas the Australian CEOs are often, they're not hungry to fix things. They're happy to know about it, but are they going to do something about it in the next 3 months? And I'd say uniformly, the share prices for the quarterly profits have all leapt once this system's been used once. I don't know if that would happen after twice and 3 times and 4 times, because this is probably picking what's called the low-hanging fruit of disaster, and which nobody knew about. If they knew about it, they might have fixed it. But if they didn't know about it, then I think there's only one we've done 3 times, and there's been successive improvements in their scores. I don't know if the 3rd time led to any increased business improvement. But we also, that was entering into the COVID era, so markets were all different then.
One last question, folks.
First of all, thank you for the talk. Really interesting stuff. I wonder if, I guess, 2 questions. One thought, one question. If you have like public aggregate reports of all the clients, just interested in seeing if there's particular things that correlate with growth or any metric, like issues that you've identified from all your clients. Just a thought. Otherwise,
I'll answer that one first.
oh, sure.
Because that's a really useful and interesting and important question. It goes to the topic of benchmarking and explaining what leads to superior performance. It's what Harvard Business Review writes papers about that, but they're sort of half made up and half based on experience. This is hard data. When it's survey data-ish, but it's still hard data. And the driver link, you can call it almost causal, because you make a change and you get this outcome. The reverse side of that is we don't have a company that got our advice and didn't do it, so we don't have a way of telling what doesn't happen to fix it when you go to the doctor and the doctor says go and get a test and you don't. Every business got scared enough that they did something. So anyway, so benchmarking, yeah.
All right. And just a technical question real quick. I didn't quite understand in the Venn diagram, I guess you mentioned the active learning is sort of a part of reinforcement learning, but is it just a process for choosing a model, or is it an actual model? I guess in the Venn diagram, the machine learning model is the deciding of questions and narrowing it down, and the other 2 are just sort of your own algorithms, right?
Okay. The optimality condition to tell you what to go for is based on improving your understanding of the data. So the feedback is the model tells you we've got a better understanding of what we're going and we've uncovered some more gaps. So that's the reinforcement. It's active learning is classified as part of reinforcement learning. It's a little bit on its own as well. So it's really about, classical statistician would say, oh, it's really about sampling of expensive data. So they might have a balanced experimental design. No, we'll do something a bit better than that because we want to know more about people that are going to die than the ones that are going to get better. So they'll pad out with more pathological cases. I'm done.
Will you join me in thanking Tom? Well, this is, we don't need this really. This brings us to the conclusion of the evening, where we traditionally open the floor to anybody who has any announcements to make, particularly people in the process of hiring. This might be Luke's chance to talk some more about that. Please go ahead. And any recruiters and such that are here now would be the time to jump up, but Luke gets first dibs.
Yes, if you would like to work on a very large amount of data, if you're attracted to the idea of having a huge number of different angles on Australian life, and you would like to be able to predict a large number of things, including where house prices are going to be in your suburb, then by all means, come and talk to me after. Or if you want to use an API and do better at your own job, that works too.
Any other announcements? Well, with that, thank you all very much for coming, and we'll bring this month's meeting to a close.